Hey, welcome in, Wolves Den. We changed things up a little bit here. We've kind of got the different set here. I got a table. I have two people. We have a third also as part of the esteemed team. So this is kind of the season recap. We're also going to be looking ahead. So I am Jay Bir, as always, here in the den. Also joining us, you might recognize some of these guys from earlier in the season. Jeremy Harper, you know him more affectionately as A-State Fan Rules, and then Christian Boutwell at By C. Boutwell.
Yeah.
Nailed it. He writes for the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. He's on the beat. He's also getting into hoops, so make sure you're following him. Make sure you're reading if you actually still subscribe to a newspaper of any kind.
Come on.
Get on. TV guys got to get their jabs in. And then also joining us via the Skype line, you see her there and all. Oh, man. Bold and beautiful there. She even put lipstick on for us. I love it. Kara Ritchie up there at the Ticket in Jonesboro. All right. Hey, girl, how you doing?
I'm okay. I'm glad I can hear you guys.
Fantastic. I know we were working hard to try to get you in here, but modern technology is grand. All right, let's jump into this here. Let's revisit last week. Arkansas State heading down to San Marcos, Texas. Throw it up there for me, fellas. Highlights of last week as they took on the Texas State Bobcats. A lot of chaos down there, but you had to deal with it. Texas State, not known for their kicking game. There you go. You see why right there. And that would actually play to Arkansas State's advantage, I believe, in this game. Now, when I say these things, just take my word for it. The team in white, the white pixels, are Arkansas State's players. You see them fumble there. It really couldn't get anything going early on in this game. Then the very next play, though, boom, Arkansas State gets the ball back from the maroon pixels in this one. And then I think things kind of started to click in this one. You see Warren Wan, he was really the catalyst of the offense early on in this one, fighting down there. He gets about the 10-yard line in this one, and then he would finish things off right here a couple plays later, getting it in, hard-fought touchdown, the human Mario Kart, as Rules here likes to refer to him as, and he does. He bounces around a lot. Texas State, though, they were a stingy team. They wouldn't go away, and offensively they looked okay in this one for what they've seen in the past. Alec Harris there, 57 yards, but that would be about the only real bright spot offensively for the Bobcats on the day. And then Kirk Merritt doing what Kirk Merritt does. Give that man a little bit of space, and he gone. There you go, 60-yarder right there for him. He is now the leading receiver in the Sun Belt. And then Moose, Justin McInnis, the Moose, the great UConn, various other sundry names, blocks the punt, gets it himself, and then from then on, it was kind of just adios, see you later for this Arkansas State team. Kind of settled in offensively. Took him a while to get going, and again, Kirk Merritt, my goodness, fumbles the ball to himself and just tiptoes the sideline, does amazing work. A 39-yarder there, makes it 28-7, and really it's just a matter of playing this thing out from here on. I believe that's Warren Wand. It is, like I said, a little hard to see from the wonderful angles that we got there. Plus, there was no replay in this game, which is also kind of annoying. They wouldn't score on that drive, but who cares because the defense coming through on that one. Tajay Chambers credited with the safety, but the entire defensive line blew that whole thing up. Arkansas State would add on a field goal a little later to give us our final 33-7 in this one. So an efficient win. They got the job done. I mean, guys, how hard is that environment to play in? I mean, you're going against a team with basically nothing to lose. You're going against a team with probably tens of people in the stands, and that's not even an exaggeration on that one. That is an empty place down there at Texas State.
And maybe that's what counts for that first half. That first half was really a microcosm of the season. You got
It was.
You got really a lot of frustration going on offensively. You feel like you should be doing more. Defensively, we did great. I think the first three possessions for Texas State was on the Red Wolves side of the field.
Yeah.
And yet the defense stood up and allowed no points. That was the good news. Then at the second half, we had that quick 3-and-out.
And right out the gate.
Yeah, and then the Bobcats scored on the very next possession, and I thought, well, this might be the time when they rally behind this Withers, when the Bobcats rally behind this Withers situation and pull out some sort of miracle upset win. But the talent took over at the second half, and then you pretty much saw what was.
Yeah, and this was still a time, where the Sun Belt title game was kind of still up in the air. So I know a lot of, if you follow in via the social media, things were a little dicey there for a lot of people there for a while.
It's actually an exciting moment. You're sitting there watching that ULM Louisiana game, and you're watching this game. So if you're just a fan of the Sun Belt, which of course we all are, it was just drama left and right, especially with the ULM missing that field goal at the end.
Gut-wrenching.
But yes, it turns out no championship for Red Wolves.
You kind of played around to that. Throw up the stats or the standings there, fellas. So finishing the season there, they tied 5-3. Arkansas State there, and then also ULL. I will refuse to call them Louisiana. 8-4, 7-5 there, though, the records. Louisiana Monroe comes up just a little short, even though they looked really good, 6-6. Bowl eligible, so good for them. And then USA and Texas State kind of round out the Western Division there. So played out, I think, the way we all kind of thought it would to a certain degree. I think Laffy, as Boutwell likes to call him, kind of, I think, surprised a lot of folks. I mean, what did you think of the West and really the divisions in general? And I think the division's probably the greatest idea that Sun Belt's come up with here in recent years.
Well, I don't think anyone knew way back when Arkansas State played at Lafayette that game was going to matter so much at the time.
Right.
And so once it played out, I mean, you could see the dominoes starting to fall. I mean, ULM and Lafayette started to when they matched up, and you knew it was going to be pretty much all on the line there. Mm-hmm. Then who's going to win that game and send them? But I mean, you're talking once Arkansas State had it and they missed ULM misses the field goal. It's just you can feel the game. You know, the game was Arkansas State was already over, and you can feel everyone turn their eyes to that one.
Right.
And then from there on, it's just like, wow, like that's the season. There it is.
Yeah, and I think even head coach Blake Anderson alluded to that a little bit after the fact that they weren't as celebratory in that Texas State win, even though wins are to be celebrated at the FBS level, but maybe not as much due to kind of the disappointment here.
But going back to that divisional play, which I don't think we really understood what the impact was going to be until it played out.
Yeah.
We had 5 teams that were
duking it out still.
Yeah, that still had a statistical shot to get in there at the very end of the season. So kudos for the Sun Belt for finally getting it right on that.
Absolutely. I know they've battled with some other things here, but this one they definitely hit the nail on the head. Let's kind of talk about this season as a whole. Kara, come on in here first with this one. It seems like it was a bit of a roller coaster, and it always seems to be with Arkansas State. Started off well, kind of dipped, ended well.
Yeah, Arkansas State finally this year kind of got the out-of-conference monkey off their back, you know, going 3-1 in out-of-conference play, and that one was a game that everybody in the country has lost, so it's not that big of a deal there. But just that hiccup in the middle, especially defensively, was what cost the Red Wolves their goals at the end of the season. You understand maybe a loss against Appalachian State there because they're a very good team, but the Georgia Southern loss hurt. The Cajuns loss was borderline unacceptable for Arkansas State to continue to want to stake its claim as one of the best teams in the Sun Belt Conference. But these guys didn't get downtrodden or anything about it. They rallied at the end of it, particularly on defense. And then because we saw such better play by the offensive line, it helped Justice Hansen put together just some absolutely monster numbers then in the month of November. And this team now, once it got to the end of it, kind of firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, they definitely remember November, but in this case, they also remembered October. Fellas, jump in here too. What do you guys think the real catalyst to turning this thing around? Because I mean, Blake Anderson kind of alluded to this too, like just the injuries they had to deal with. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, but it was a factor, and they threw some guys that maybe weren't ready for that kind of playing time. They were thrust into the spotlight.
Yeah, I asked him this week. I said, "What do you think the key theme to the season was?" And it's injuries and younger guys having to step in when they're really not ready.
Right.
And they've just had to throw them in there. And I think part of the reason too that their offense really starts to click is you can look at another young guy, and it's Marcel Murray, the freshman tailback.
Yeah.
And when you can give Justice Hansen some of that time and some space, and make a defense a little unpredictable about what they're going to do, then the Arkansas State has a more well-rounded offense, and I think that's helped them a ton.
Justin Hansen, everybody take a drink. Kind of a rolling theme here. I think really, and I think too, the evolution of the vertical passing game, and I think Marcel Murray kind of helped with that, because we saw against Appalachian State, they just got flat out coached, out everything in that game, it looked like. I know a lot of people were questioning after the fact. There was a lot of side-to-side passing, and considering they couldn't really run the ball, you figured take a couple of shots here and there, and even Justice looked a little shaky on some of those vertical passes. Was it really the Marcel Murray effect that really opened up or began to open up that vertical game?
I think so, and I think, like Kara said, it's a little of the offensive line too. Those guys were a new bunch playing together. It was a puzzle they had to figure out for a long time. But once they could figure it out, those guys, they started to give him more time, and they allowed fewer sacks, and Murray could get bigger holes. And so I think the entire goal of that offense was to make a defense a little on its edge and figure out what are they going to do and keep. Are is Hansen going to throw the ball every time, or are they going to throw it straight to Kirk Merritt, or what's going to happen? And so once they found a little bit of a running game and they started to go to it and go to it and go to it, then they had more and more throughout the season.
Yeah, you know what? At the beginning of the season, you were talking about the side outs, the side-to-side passing. I really felt like the goal for Anderson and his offense was to limit turnovers.
Yeah.
And throwing it downfield gives them a better chance of throwing turnovers. I really thought they were just trying not to turn over the ball so much. In fact, if you look at Hansen's numbers this year, he's done a pretty good job with the ball. I think that strategy just totally fell apart against Appalachian State. I think another thing that started doing a little bit better is using Wand more effectively.
Yeah.
A lot of the beginning of the season was Wand going up the middle, which he can be effective at times doing that, but he's really great if you use him in the pass game. If you give him the shovel passes, if you throw him out into space, that's when he's really most effective. I felt like at least the last 2 or 3 games, they really used Wand to his best of his abilities.
Absolutely, and also too, I think you mentioned the offensive line. They kind of got their act together. Excuse me, and I know they did a little bit of shuffling in there too because they had to deal with some injuries. What really seemed to click, and Kara, feel free to jump in on some of that too. What did you notice on the offensive line that really kind of was kind of that springboard?
I think it was time. First of all, because I think they really throughout the season they had the same 5, and then they started to change up at left guard a little bit between Andre Harris and a veteran, and so when they brought in and they had 6 of those guys competing, and then toward the end of the season, Sednali, the right tackle, went down with an injury, but those guys, they'd been together for long enough now that they feel comfortable beside each other and they can bump each other and they know, picking up different assignments. I think once time helps everything, especially with a group of young guys. And so once they could figure it out after a while, then they were, ready to go.
Just to kind of follow up on what Christian is saying there, that's definitely part of it. These 5 guys have to think as one mind, and obviously that's going to take a little bit of time when you've got some new bodies there. But looking at what they did statistically, Justice Hansen was sacked 14 times the first 4 FBS games of the season. So obviously you throw out that Southeast Missouri State game, but 14 times in those 4 games, including, I believe, 6 against Georgia Southern. And then the final 7 games of the season, only 6 times he was sacked. So just so much more time for him to be able to just stay upright and survey the field and get comfortable back there. And that's, I think, one of the reasons we saw so much more increased offensive production at the second half of the season. Yeah,
and you do notice his manner behind the offensive line at the beginning of the season is different than at the end of the season. He was very skittish by the time he got to Georgia Southern, and by the time we had the Red Wolves faced Appalachian State. So now you look at him, he seems very comfortable in the pocket. He does, and like throwing it downfield and making the plays. So yeah. Night and day.
I think it obviously affected their play calling some too.
Right.
Because instead of having to go, to the quicker passes or just get rid of the ball faster, they could settle down and they could expand their playbook a little bit to where Hansen can look at different options and it doesn't have to go every time to Kirk Merritt, which it generally did anyway. But
usually not a bad play call though.
But they can look elsewhere and they have more time to figure out other things.
And defensively, this team also evolved as well. They finally stopped giving up the big plays, or at least more of them. I know earlier in the season, you take a look at that Georgia Southern game, for example, for the most part, kept them in pretty good check, but really 4 plays beat them in that game.
Well, look at Texas State game, though. The one play that beat them, big play. So that Cawthon defense is always going to give up a big play because they're so aggressive.
Right.
So you're never going to have a shutdown defense necessarily with Arkansas State. Even though I think,
at least in terms of the yardage,
right? That's never going to be a thing. But it seems like after Louisiana, after that failure in Lafayette, the defense has really sucked it up and played better.
Yeah, what did you guys notice? What was really the catalyst there? I mean, obviously the evolution of Jerry Jacobs, I think, has been one of the biggest roles in this defense being a lot better because now you have that lockdown and then the man-to-man, so it frees up other guys to do other things. Not to mention he was on a lot of the best receivers in the Sun Belt, and which kind of also allowed Kirk Merritt to sort of take over that role. I mean, he shut dudes down.
Yeah, and I think if you look at Arkansas State, you see all the studs that they have on the defensive line.
Yeah.
So when you can send those dudes and leave Jerry by himself, then that was the blueprint all year long. Was just to send them and leave Jerry alone, and a lot of times it worked. But I think even Joe Coughlin will tell you, a lot of teams were picking on their linebackers. They're a younger group of linebackers, and they would just try and go at them. They try and isolate them and make them play. And so once they could, their linebackers, of course, needed time. Once they had some, they figured out what to do and how to communicate better and talk to each other, and the defense played better as a whole.
Christian just absolutely nailed it there, because Cawthon's defense relies so heavily on excellent communication, particularly from his Mike guy there at the linebacking group. And we saw a whole lot of Tajay Chambers this year, who, of course, he's been on this team for 4 years, but has had such limited playing time because of the injury history. And then other linebacker you saw in there a lot was Derek Bean out of those two spots. And that's a guy that's a freshman. So once those guys got settled in, once those guys had that communication, it was a completely different story for the rest of the season.
Absolutely here. So I guess here in a nutshell, and I like to look at this as the big picture here, I think it was a good season. Solid season. I think people, you can be disappointed in the outcomes of some of the games, and obviously not playing in the Sun Belt title game because there was a lot of hype coming into this season, but we were, cautioned with a lot of that hype early on, especially from this coaching staff. But I think you can have it both ways. You can be disappointed, but you can also kind of revel in the fact that you won 8 games, and that's no slouch.
8-4, good season. Against the weight of expectations, a little bit disappointing.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. You can have it both ways because both are true.
Yeah.
I think when you look at the season as a whole, and given the theme was really injury and younger guys, for Arkansas State to flip this season from 3 conference losses to many in a row, and now that they're sitting in a bowl once again, I think they would take it as a positive, especially publicly. They'll take it as a positive. But I think internally, of course, it's a little disappointing. I mean, you're not competing in the Sun Belt Championship game this Saturday.
Yeah.
You're going to a lower tier bowl in the conference, but I think as a whole, if those younger guys get all the experience that they got, I think you can take away a positive from that.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little bit and say that, well, look, Arkansas State has not had a season set up schedule-wise like this. You dodge Troy in conference play. You get App State at home. Your out-of-conference teams are teams that aren't necessarily that successful, with the exception, again, of Alabama, who is going to beat everybody in the country. So you had everything pointing in the right direction for this year. You've got a senior quarterback that is absolutely amazing, a senior running back. Most of your skill players are back. You add in a monster like Kirk Merritt. You've got this surprise of a freshman in Marcel Murray. You had so many things going in the right direction that if people are disgruntled today, I get it.
No, I'm right there with you guys. And like I said, I think you can kind of see it both ways here. I think there's obvious disappointment in the fact that, like Kara mentioned, there was a lot of hype. Everything seemed to be breaking right, but then, injuries crept up, and, it kind of is what it is sometimes. And a lot of times, and again, I know this is things like fans don't like to hear, but, when you have a lot of new faces, and then obviously one of the prime weapons that went down early in the year was Dahu Green. Everybody kind of forgets about him because he played 2 quarters. And
played those quarters great.
And he was fantastic. He was going to be a beast. And I think if you're looking at that, and again, I kind of harp on this, that people want to look at as excuses, or, oh, this is the same old thing we've always heard, but it is what it is. And a lot of people don't play freshmen for a reason. And this team was forced to play some freshmen. Now, sometimes it'll work out, Marcel Murray. Sometimes it takes a little longer for guys to sort of evolve into their role and even understand the role. And the game's a whole lot faster, so there's an adjustment period there, even against some of the weaker teams out there. High school football to college football, it's a pretty big jump.
Yeah. But Kara's right, though. You look at that roster, and it seems stacked. Maybe it wasn't deep, but it was stacked in the right places. And she's right, too. The schedule is stacked in the right places. But then you look back, the Mountaineers are legitimately one of the top group of 5 teams in the country. And if you look at them statistically, they're just one of the top teams in general. Yeah. Losing to Georgia Southern is the only reason why they're not ranked in the top 25 right now. The loss against Georgia Southern, that's a tough place to play. The loss against Louisiana, Lafayette's a tough place to play. We should have won that game. There's no doubt about that.
But these two teams, they don't win on each other's turf.
No, they
Historically,
don't.
so it's not like that was a
Blake
Blake thing. I mean, it's nothing new here.
Still, I think the most disappointing game for me wasn't the one in Lafayette. To me, the most disappointing game was the home game against Appalachian State,
Yep.
and not because necessarily because Red Wolves lost. It was the way they lost.
Yeah.
Not getting into the end zone in their own crowd on national TV, that just looked bad, and that really kind of put a damper to me on the season as a whole.
Absolutely here. But, as Boutwell mentioned, there are good things to look forward to. There's a trip to the desert with the I was kind of expecting to do this show and kind of have a lot of things up in the air, but I think when the conference sort of announced that the runner-up will go to the Cure Bowl, I think a lot of other things sort of fell right into place, and we can speculate.
Did that feel unusual that the bowl games were announcing half of their setup so soon? Or is this?
I would have thought that the Cure Bowl maybe would have jumped in a little earlier with their announcement maybe at the same time, but I don't know if there was something they were still trying to work out because they were fourth in the pecking order. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you had to swing some deals, but you would imagine that Southern and Troy are going to go obviously to the Camellia and the Dollar General, which was kind of speculated. Hence why you see the graphic there. Red Wolves going to the Arizona Bowl out there in Tucson. It's going to be a CBS Sports Network game. So I know a lot of people who watch the Cure Bowl were pretty excited about that. They have a good presentation with things. So who they're playing is still kind of up in the air. We won't know that till I believe December 2nd, December 3rd, when kind of everything sort of plays itself out. But the glories of the internet here, we can look ahead. We can kind of dive into a few opponents, some of the possible opponents. I think I've seen about 4 kind of consistently across the board in terms of bowl projections. We'll kind of go by them one by one. First one up, though, Fresno State. Scary team. They were in the top 25 at one point. They like to score, and they like to score a lot. What do you guys make of the potential matchup there against the Dogs?
Yeah, I think this one is the biggest of the stretches for Arkansas State because Fresno's got to play in the Mountain West Championship this weekend, and when you're looking at how this is going to line up, and if Fresno does in fact lose to Boise State, I think the Mountain West would send them to a higher tier bowl within the conference. But
yeah.
Fresno can play, and these guys. I mean, Arkansas State's expecting a game out of whoever they get. But,
sure.
I mean, Fresno, Boise, whichever team comes out of that championship game is going to be good.
Yeah, the only way I think we end up playing Fresno is somebody decides that the logistics of the game makes sense for them. From what I've understood, the trip is pretty easy to make. It means one more practice at their own place.
Sure.
I think San Diego State has the same sort of setup and reasoning behind that too. But yeah, I think Christian's right. That's going to be a stretch. Somebody's going to want to see Fresno State on a higher stage.
Fresno State is statistically kind of good at everything. They're one of the best teams. They're the best team defensively in the Mountain West Conference. They're great offensively as well. They forced an insane amount of turnovers this year. They don't turn it over. They've got a really good quarterback. That would be a very tough opponent for Arkansas State. And if you look at advanced statistics, they're ranked as a top 10 team in S&P+. However, according to their fan base, their head coach has been vocal in the past about desiring the later bowls because he likes to have those extra few weeks to, get in his younger guys some reps, get some extra prep time and things like that. So who knows how much say he might have and in what direction he would push if Fresno State wasn't able to make it, wasn't able to win the Mountain West Conference Championship.
Yeah, now just sort of an asterisk here. Here's how the Mountain West setup works. Obviously, if the UCF stumbles their toe enough, Boise has the potential to get to that.
Right.
One of the big New Year's Six bowls. Probably not likely. So the winner of that Mountain West goes to Las Vegas. The Cheez-It Bowl potentially could be short. That's usually a Big 12, Pac-12 matchup, and it's always funny to say. They would get slotted as the second pick if there's an availability. So there's that. And then the next one, they kind of sort of do it like the SEC does, where the conference has a little bit of say-so in the matchups and some of those things with the New Mexico Bowl, the famous Idaho Potato Bowl, and then the Hawaii Bowl. Obviously, Hawaii is already in that one, so no worries there. And then falls the Arizona Bowl. So just so you know what we're dealing with here, and that's why there's kind of a lot of potential options here. But I do think Fresno brings a lot to the table. I think they're similar to Arkansas State. Maybe they do things a little better than Arkansas State does right now. at least offensively, I think they have a little more firepower. Defensively, I think these two teams match up pretty well. I guess in terms of the potential matchup, how would you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I think you have to look toward the middle pack of the Mountain West. I think you need to look. It's similar to the Sun Belt. I think the Arizona Bowl's in the same kind of second tier, gets their pick later kind of schedule.
Yeah.
And I think if you're looking at these teams, you're looking at San Diego State, Nevada, potentially Wyoming. I think you're looking at the bottom half of who they can actually get. And I think Arkansas State will tell you they're looking at about 3 to 5 teams, and it's the Fresno and the few that I just mentioned. And so they're looking at, but there's none definitive enough to start pinpointing and really preparing for one of them.
All right, well, you mentioned San Diego State. Let's talk a little San Diego State there. They don't have the illustrious running back there anymore, so that's something that you don't have to worry about prepping for. What have you guys taken away from what you might know about the Aztecs?
It seems like San Diego State had 2 seasons. They opened the year just super hot, 7-2.
Yeah.
They beat Arizona State when they were ranked. They are the ones that gave Boise State their one conference loss. And then something happened. And I've been trying to dig in and find. I know they had some quarterback issues, but when their first string quarterback got injured, they actually kept winning with their second string guy. The new guy came in, and that seems to be, or the old guy came back in. That seems where the losing started. They've lost, I believe, 4 in a row, and so they're coming in very cold. And if we were to get that opponent, we'd be coming in with an opponent that's just ice cold right now.
I think if you're Arkansas State, the thing you notice most about San Diego State is that they probably won't outscore you. I mean, they
put up a little over 22 a game, so that puts them 10th in the Mountain West.
Yeah, they haven't, not in a game this season, if they score more than 31 points. And I think Arkansas State's looking at that like, all right, like we might be able to, if they can just hang with us for a little while, then we can see what can happen. But I think that's the most notable thing when you look at San Diego State and how their season has played out.
One thing about those losses, though, is San Diego State was very competitive in all of these games. Their 4 losses were by a combined 17 points. So only Fresno State beat them by, more than 1 score. So it's not like they just went out and completely face planted in the second half of the season. They were competitive. They just, for some reason, kept coming up just a little bit short in these games.
Yeah, that's true. It sounds to me like it's their defense that's keeping them in these games, and their offense is just not rising to the challenge.
So maybe a little bit of a Texas State flair to it, but maybe not as woefully bad on the offensive side of things here. Let's go to the other wolf pack, if you will, of Nevada or Nevada, however you want to say it. Didn't bother me. A team that's kind of interesting in terms of offense. They were the number 4 team in the Mountain West, a little over 32 a game. Potent on the offense. Still, I believe they were 7-5, if memory serves me right here, without looking down. What do we make of the Wolfpack?
To me, I think the Wolfpack is the natural team for Arkansas State to play, simply because of how statistically they line up very well. They both are very potent, quick-scoring offenses. The defenses will give up yards and occasionally give up a lot of points. So it makes for a very entertaining game. They also kind of fell in their conferences in the same type of way,
right?
Just kind of on the outside looking in. And how could you deny a Wolfpack versus Red Wolves game? That just marketing. That would be
marketing. Oh man, a lot of wolves out there in the Arizona
It would be
sun.
Constant howling all game long.
Yeah, I think this one would be the most similar for Arkansas State to a Sun Belt matchup. I think it would feel a little bit like a conference game for them. Just looking at the 2 offenses and how they would match up, and so I think Arkansas State might find that favorable. They might enjoy that kind of opponent, but we'll see.
With Nevada, one of the things about them is they were a little turnover prone, particularly with interceptions. They tossed 15 interceptions this year. They do have a bit of a stud there. They've got a freshman running back, Tua Taw. If I'm saying that correctly, probably not. That was, I think, the Mountain West Conference Freshman of the Year, so they have a little bit of some star power there.
So again, I think things seem to line up very similarly with the Wolfpack and the Red Wolves. Rushing wise, I think passing is a little more their bread and butter. Nevada only putting up 157 per game on the ground, anyways. You saw a lot of running there in the highlights, but defensively, I think that team is fairly stout. I want to say they give about 28 a game. So I guess theoretically here, how would that one play out? Because it's always odd to sort of play yourself, and yet you're playing a different set of colors and everything, because like Kara's mentioned, they had the stud freshman running back, Marcel Murray. Now, granted, they're not as turnover prone as, say, Arkansas State. Justice takes care of the ball, but defensively they kind of ball hawk a little bit, similar to Arkansas State. I don't think they have near the defensive line, but how would you guys see that one playing out?
I would look at my gut, which is profound. My gut says that it wouldn't be a high-scoring game. It seems like usually when you end up playing yourself, you end up just sort of butting heads against one wall after another. So knowing each other so well, I feel like it'd become a defensive struggle. You guys might not agree with that at all, but that's just my gut.
No, I think that kind of happens more times than not.
Yeah, I mean, they're when you're looking at these two teams, and I think when Arkansas State looks at a lot of these Mountain West teams, they're figuring out how their offense can stack against defenses normally. But I think they'll tell you this, like, how do our defenses match against some of these offenses that are different? Fresno is not Nevada, and Nevada's not San Diego State.
Yeah.
So how do they start to begin to prepare for offenses that look so different?
I will throw in, just for comparison's sake, obviously it doesn't mean anything that much in the big picture, but Nevada did lose their final game of the season, and that was to UNLV. So
I noticed that.
Nevada they do have a common opponent there. One interesting thing about that game is Armani Rogers, after playing at Arkansas State, had an injury there, and he was out until the last 2 games of the season. So he was back against Nevada. He had a very good game and accounted for 5 total touchdowns that kind of sparked UNLV to the win there.
And also, too, I think UNLV had to kind of come back in that game as well. I think it was looking rough for them, and then kind of chipped away at that one, and then was a little back and forth there at the end, and I think it came down to who had the ball last.
Well, if I recall, too, didn't Lexington Thomas do very well in that game, too? I think he was able. He was
one of the catalysts.
Yeah, I think he was able to run pretty well on Nevada, so that might be something to look at.
All right, final team here, kind of another one of the, because I really think it'll be one of those last 2 we talked about, but Wyoming, they still got a shot, I think, but I think much like Monroe, they might be sort of that team in the Mountain West on the outside looking in, but we got to prep for them because that's what we do here. Wyoming, I'm not really sure what to make of them. They're not a great team, but they're not a bad team, but they're also not that great.
Here's the thing about Wyoming. They started the season, there's a lot of high expectations. I think they blew out New Mexico State to open the year, and everybody's like, who cares that Josh Allen is gone? Wyoming is Wyoming.
Who's that guy?
And they're just going to make a lot of points. In fact, I heard a lot of people say, they're probably going to win against Washington State. Well, of course, Washington State destroyed them, and then went through just a miserable first half of the season where they couldn't get anything going. They ended up having to win their last 4 games of the season to get bowl eligible, which granted, it was against the lower, the second tier of Mountain West opponents, but still, that's pretty good to go 4 wins in a row, scratch out the wins, and get bowl eligible. They might be the last guy out, but it'd be a shame considering they worked so hard to get there.
Yeah, I think they are similar to ULM in the fact that they're not going to get likely a Mountain West guaranteed bowl bid. I think they're looking outside into one of these supplementary bowls to, how they can fit into there. So that's why I think Arkansas State's looking more at the top 5 of the Mountain West that are all bowl eligible instead of Wyoming, and I think they have to consider Wyoming, but I think it's kind of a long shot.
And sometimes though, it's not about necessarily whether the team deserves it. It's about whether or not the team has marketability, and Wyoming does have that, especially after last year's bump with Allen. So I wouldn't be surprised if somebody looked at Wyoming and went, that's a pretty good draw. We can put them in there and maybe get some eyeballs on that.
Even the Mountain West own commissioner has came out and said that Wyoming is probably not going to a bowl. I feel like he would have some insight on that. So this is one that I'm not really paying a lot of attention to. I will say though, they don't have a very good offense. 20.7 points per game is not going to raise a lot of eyebrows anywhere with the way offenses go in the country now. It's kind of bad.
Now defensively, they're pretty stout. I think 22 a game, so that puts them 3rd in the Mountain West. So I think that was really sort of the catalyst of things. So maybe a little bit of a Texas State flair again. Really crummy offense, pretty stout defense. Could be an intriguing matchup, but I think it just really depends on what happens with the Cheez-It Bowl. Makes you giggle every time. And I think if that one opens up, they've got a shot, but I think I'm with you about it. I think it's really going to either be the Wolfpack or the Aztecs in this one. So we'll see. But come December 2nd, we will finally have an opponent to really break down. We might bring you guys back in here to really dive into who the Red Wolves are going to be playing this year. All right, so that will do it here. Richie's done left. Oh, there she is. All right, now she's back in things.
Not to completely hijack the show, but I feel like we would be just a tiny bit remiss if we didn't talk about the Sun Belt Conference Awards because they just came out. I mean,
here we go. You're getting it breaking.
news.
Here we go.
Right.
Let's go.
Look, well, Justice Hansen is the Player of the Year in the Sun Belt Conference.
Hey, you did get it. We were
So-
debating that.
So that's big news. Ronnie Bingham, the Defensive Player of the Year.
That's kind of what we thought there,
Deserved.
Marcel Murray, the Freshman of the Year.
Oh, they do have a freshman.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
we weren't
yeah.
sure about that.
Ran the table.
I'm not done.
Oh.
Kirk Merritt, the Newcomer of the Year.
Yeah, we got
A-State,
him.
yeah, A-State kind of racks up there in the major awards. So that's everything except Offensive Player of the Year and Coach of the Year, which went to Zach Thomas and Scott Satterfield of App State, respectively. So
Yeah, kind of.
good haul.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. And I think on top of that point, I think it goes back to what you said earlier, Kara, about just the expectations and kind of just literally, good season, but just really disappointing. And then, boom, there you go. And it reflects in the awards there. You have so
Yeah,
many
the talent,
people.
yeah.
With a lot of talent, but it just didn't translate on the field. So,
You know, I'm a little surprised about the Coach of the Year.
Really?
Well, Satterfield is a great coach and deserves any accolades he gets. But I felt like Lunsford at Georgia Southern did
Yeah.
a really good job turning that program around. And I feel like
beat App State.
Yeah, and ended up being App State. And I feel like it's, oh gosh, suddenly I have a brain freeze. The guy from Louisiana.
Billy Napier.
Billy Napier had a great season. Put a lot more energy back into that team.
Yeah.
So those two guys were really deserving. Satterfield deserves it. I'm not saying he doesn't, but I'm a little surprised that didn't go to Lunsford.
Yeah, and this conference has been weird with some of the accolades at times. I mean, we saw an undefeated Blake Anderson get snubbed for sort of one of of those great turnaround type of coach. And I forget who won that year, but
it was South Alabama guy, Joey.
it may have been. But that was.
Was it not Trent Miles?
Oh, maybe it was.
No, it was at Georgia
State.
State.
Was
That's right.
eligible that year? Yeah.
Yeah, when they went, I believe, 7-5 that year. So it was.
Yeah, and then he got fired the following season.
Go figure. That was a Marlins move right there. But yeah, it was a little different. I'm not surprised though. I figured it would be Satterfield, who may or may not be there in the mountains too much longer. He's been linked to the Louisville job, as has Neil Brown. And I guess quickly, and then we'll put a bow on this thing. I know a lot of talk here has been, and obviously we're getting into the coaching carousel, has been, the Sun Belt doesn't really get guys into the P5 beyond what Arkansas State did in sort of the one and done era there. And, there's good coaches down here, and it seems to be the P5s are kind of focusing on their own, and they hire a lot of coordinators. Do we see either one of these guys maybe taking that step? Because we saw, and especially with Hudspeth down there at Lafayette, never really struck while the iron was hot, kind of the cautionary tale.
Yeah, I think when you look at Neil Brown and Satterfield, they're longer resumes now, and I think they have more extensive and more, their resumes are built to a place to where these Power 5 teams are now looking at them, especially locally in North Carolina with Satterfield and like in anything on that East Coast. I think of course they're going to draw a lot of eyes.
And I was a little surprised that UNC didn't give him more of a look. Of course, when you get Mac Brown, what do you do?
You know what? Hudspeth is sort of, to me, a cautionary tale for Sun Belt coaches who've seen some success.
Yeah.
You talked about striking when the iron is hot. Sun Belt is a volatile conference, and one day you're a genius, and the next day you're not a genius. So guys like Satterfield, Neil Brown, if they have aspirations to go elsewhere, this would be a perfect season to do that.
Absolutely. Kara, what you got?
Yeah, I think I don't know how you don't call those guys. I mean, both are rumored to be in play in Louisville, and then you have to think that Georgia Tech is going to want to get away from that option offense, and if they do, it would make sense to have both of those guys on the short list as well. So that's another spot that could be that you might want to watch out for. I would be also, and to switch gears just a little bit, I'm fascinated by what they're doing at Texas State because they've announced the hiring, of course, of Jake Spavital, who is the West Virginia offensive coordinator, but the name to really kind of look at there is Bob Stitt, who they are rumored to be targeting to be their offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
And that dude is kind of nuts, some of the stuff that he does offensively. He once said that his goal was to run 50 plays a half. So he's going to want to push the pace and just look for some interesting things to happen at Texas State if those are the guys that he can bring in.
Yeah, it could be interesting, but I think it's just a heap of mess down there as a whole.
Huge.
Down there at Texas State. So good hires, I think, there for Texas State. We'll have to see how it kind of works out because, Withers was supposed to be that next great mind there too. And I think too with Georgia Tech, I think Georgia Southern should maybe be worried because, I mean, really, if you're going to try to change the whole philosophy of things there at Georgia Tech, you're going to have to be prepared to do like a 4 or 5 year change around. And we saw what happened with Southern. They weren't too keen on that idea. Now, they hold the triple option a little more dear than I think maybe Georgia Tech does. I'm not sure what their feelings are on the type of offense that they want to run. But I think that is one. And obviously, Willie Fritz there at Tulane, who is a former Georgia Southern guy, are some names to maybe watch out there at Georgia Tech as well. So we'll see how it all plays out here. All right, like I said, let's put a bow on this thing right here. We got an Arizona Bowl to get ready for. We will definitely do more of that as we get closer and closer to that. It's about a month away, so if you're trying to get some traveling together, you got a little Christmas present, a little stocking stuffer there, go ahead and knock that out. And I would be totally remiss if we didn't send out all of our thoughts, our prayers, our positive vibes to Coach Anderson and his wife, Wendy. She had her cancer flare back up, and from what we have understand, it's spread a little bit there. So we definitely send all of that your way, Coach, and we hope Wendy bounces back sooner rather than later because she's the boss, and we know how that works here. All right, so for our esteemed guests here, quickly, guys, kind of where can they find you, Harp?
They can find me online at College Football News. You look up Sunbelt Heat, and you'll find my columns there.
A-State Fan Rules as well.
Yeah, at BySteveBoutwell on Twitter, and of course in the newspaper. Please pick one up.
Get a subscription.
That's right.
At Kara_Richie on Twitter, and then you can follow along with my show, The Workday Red Zone, which airs Monday through Friday from 11 to 1 on 95.3 The Ticket, 970 KEDA, and 95.3theticket.com.
And make sure you get on the SoundCloud there. I love the T motivationals that they always do. He's always
Every Wednesday.
That's it, man. Every Wednesday. That's Terry's a hoot, and he's got the beard game.
Yeah, he's looking strong.
Yep.
Yeah, he was looking good out there in Arizona. All right, well, we've rambled on long enough here. We'll get to a lot more come basketball season, but for now, y'all, we will see y'all next time.